Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Combating Cancer. My name is Gwen Kelly. I'm so glad you're here, whether you're a returning listener or you're tuning in for the very first time. A little bit of background information about me for my new listeners here is that I was diagnosed with stage 3 astrocytoma brain cancer at 19 years old. I started this podcast to create a safe, supporting space for people going through treatment, those in remission, and even those who have lost a loved one to come together, share stories, and feel less alone. Today, I'm sharing my personal journey with radiation, something many of you have asked about. If you haven't yet listened to episode 1, I highly recommend checking that out first to get the full picture of my diagnosis and early treatment. But either way, I'm so glad you're here. So when I first found out I had a tumor, it was because I had a seizure in New York. But in Minnesota, where I currently live, that means you're legally not allowed to drive for 90 days. At the time, my radiation treatment was scheduled at the Mayo Clinic, and that's only about an hour and a half from my home. Not being able to drive myself was extremely difficult for me. For those of you who know me personally, you know how much I love my independence, especially driving, where I can listen to music and just have that peaceful alone time. Losing that control was hard, but my family and friends stepped up and they drove me to every single appointment. 30 days in a row, 3-hour round trip. It was exhausting, but it was also meaningful. I had extremely deep conversations, ones that I never expected to have, but I'll always cherish that time together, even though that was a very difficult point for me in my life. And when I first heard the Mayo Clinic, I thought, okay, no big deal. But then they said I'll be going there for 30 consecutive days, and suddenly it felt very overwhelming. I even joked that, there's only one Texas Roadhouse in Rochester. How many times can I eat there? So before starting my treatment, I met with my team at the Mayo. They're fantastic. They walked me through the long list of possible side effects: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fatigue, sweating, hair loss, all of the great stuff you want to have. Then they gave me a small piece of good news, and they told me that I'd be receiving proton radiation instead of photon. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, proton radiation stops at the tumor instead of passing through it, which helps limit long-term damage to healthy brain tissue. And that just made a huge difference for me and gave me a little bit of hope. And next came the mask fitting, and oh my goodness, I had no idea what I was in for. They created a custom mesh mold of my face. It was probably 3D printed. It had a built-in mouth guard and only small holes near the nostrils so I could breathe. And once that mask was secured, I literally couldn't move my head at all. It was tight, confining, and oh wow, I'm just so happy that I am not claustrophobic, but it was necessary to keep everything perfectly still for the precision targeting during radiation. And each day of my treatment of radiation was actually scheduled at different times. Sometimes I would be there at 6 a.m., other times 6 p.m., or even as late as I believe it was 11:30. The actual radiation part only took about 5 minutes, but I could be on the table for up to an hour and a half depending on how busy it was that day, because proton therapy is still rare in the US. Mayo was packed with patients and we all had to wait our turn. I'd lie there in the mask, unable to move, listening to machines beep, and I'd feel this warm sensation on the right side of my head, and that was it. The mask would be off, I'd be back in my clothes, then back in my car for the long ride home. My parents and I agreed early on that I'd come home every single night instead of staying nearby like they usually recommend for patients that are going through this long of a duration of treatment. And they wanted me to have the comfort of my own bed, and I'm so grateful that we decided to do that and they made the sacrifice to drive me. So every single week, it was usually on Fridays, I would meet with my team to talk through the side effects. At first, things were okay. There were no major symptoms that I was feeling rather than just the emotional side effects of my new reality, but I knew that the worst was coming, which was hair loss. They told me from the start that I would lose my hair where the laser hit from the top right of my forehead to behind my right ear. I tried to prepare myself mentally, but nothing can prepare you for pulling your own hair out with your hands. I think it started around day 12. I remember taking off the top of my hat and seeing strands in it. I literally froze. I thought, nope, not happening. And then I put my hat quickly back on and pretended like Didn't see that. And then in the shower, more would fall out. I'd watch it swirl around the drain and pretend it wasn't mine. Eventually, by day 20-ish, it was coming out in clumps. I'd brush my hair and I'd see massive handfuls come out. And by the time I hit day 30, the end of my treatment, the whole side of my head was bald and it was just devastating. I cried, and it was probably the most emotional part of the entire process. And I will say to this day, it was probably the worst thing I experienced throughout everything I had gone through when I got diagnosed. And I do want to mention that there's this bell out the Mayo that patients ring when they finish radiation. And each day I remember I was there, I'd hear someone ring it and I'd think, oh man, I wish that was me. So I kept a countdown. Every day I'd say, okay, day 20 is done, just 10 more to go. I just needed something to look forward to. And finally, on day 30, I got to ring that bell. My dad and my brother Frank were there. There's even a video of it, but honestly, I didn't know how to feel. When I was ringing it, I was happy, but I also wasn't at the same time. I was bracing myself for what was coming next, and that was a full year of chemotherapy. So yes, it was a milestone, and it was a great moment, but it was not quite the finish line. Besides the hair loss, nausea was my worst symptom. I failed every anti-nausea medication they gave me. Car rides were my worst nightmare. I never knew when I was going to throw up, and I wasn't always pleasant to be around. I had days where I was emotionally drained and snapped at the people driving me, and they just had the best patience and love for me. But yeah, throughout the entire process, everyone was incredible. The Mayo staff, there were times I would be silently crying under the mask, and they never made me feel embarrassed. They'd gently lift the mask and say something like, oh, Gwen, what movie are you going to watch today? Or what are you going to do after this? What's the plan for the day? Are you going to go to the gym? Are you going to do more school? Their kindness just meant everything. Radiation wasn't fun. It was hard. It was exhausting, but I got through it. And if you're ever going through radiation, my biggest advice is keep a countdown. Focus on getting through one day at a time. If that's too much, just focus on getting through the hour, whatever it takes, because eventually day 30 will come and you'll ring your own bell. And if you have to move on to the next stages of treatment, you move on. But you can do it. You just have to take it one day at a time. I took it one day at a time and I made it. I didn't feel like I was going to make it some days, but here I am to tell you guys about it. So you can do it. That is all I have for today, guys. That's my little story about my process with radiation. Thank you guys so much for listening today. As always, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on my podcast or have a sponsorship inquiry, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm so beyond grateful for the support, and I'm very excited to keep this journey going. Chat to you guys next Wednesday. Take care.